Release me at once.
Yes, yes. There is a me to be released and a place to be released from. Keep struggling. Girls practicing Buddhism.
OMG, the female deities are so empowering! I love the focus on universal compassion!
Boys practicing Buddhism.
If you visit a bookstore in the West and look for books about Buddhism, what do you think you'll find? Buddhism for Beginners, Down-to-Earth Dharma, How to Think Like a Monk. There are dozens of bestsellers pushing a watered-down, westernized form of Buddhism, and it's really not much more than glorified self-help. Meditation is not depicted as a transcendental cosmic experience, but as a calming mental health practice, something for middle-aged white women to add to their morning routines. Buddhist philosophy is not depicted as a primordial system of metaphysics, but as this vague idea of just go with the flow, man, become one with the universe, peace out. But originally, Buddhism was a religion for warriors. It was a religion for blue-eyed, Indo-Aryan aristocrats. The real teachings of Buddha are fierce, harsh, violent, and deeply elitist. What's that? You were born as a blind, deformed orphan in the slums of Mumbai? You spend your entire life hobbling through the mud, begging for coins on the side of the road? You deserve it. That's karma. You must have done something in your past life. Better luck next time, pal.
As some lotus flowers grow in deep, muddy water, as others push up towards the surface of the water, yet others emerge from the water and stand up free from the water. Thus there are, in contrast to the mass of people, beings of a nobler kind.
Western leftists often describe Buddhism as an egalitarian religion because it focuses so much on charity and giving to the poor. But there's a big difference. In leftism, charity is done for the sake of the beggar, to lift him out of poverty. In Buddhism, charity is done for the sake of the giver. You do charity because it's good for your soul, because it helps you escape attachment from material things. You couldn't care less about the beggar. In fact, you want him to stay poor so that you can keep giving him charity. As one wise old guru once said, if there were no beggars, we would have to create them. But okay, to really understand Buddhism, we have to do a bit of controversial history and talk about the Aryans. The Aryans were a tribe of blonde, blue-eyed barbarians who rode down from the Eurasian steppes riding horses and drinking raw milk. They conquered India thousands of years ago and enslaved the short, dark-skinned natives. Even today, high-caste Indians have lighter skin because they're descended from the Aryans. They're also taller and more likely to have blue or green eyes. Genetic studies show that the higher you are on the Indian caste system, the more genetic material you share with modern Europeans. The Aryans ruled as aristocrats for thousands of years, and their language, Sanskrit, became the sacred language of Hinduism. Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, was descended from those Aryan warriors. His mother was a princess from the Aryan Kalia kingdom, and his father was the ruler of the Aryan Shakya Republic in the Himalayas. There's an ancient Buddhist text called 32 Signs of a Great Man, and you know what one of the signs is? Very blue eyes. In the original Sanskrit, Buddha's Four Noble Truths are actually the Four Aryan Truths. That's literally the word, Aryan. Noble is a very bad translation. The idea is really aristocratic in every biological, racial sense of that word. Buddha was raised in a palace, in the most privileged and luxurious life you can imagine. Everyone he knew was a beautiful young aristocrat, so he didn't even know that old age, suffering, or death existed. One day, he was riding his chariot through town, and he caught sight of a crippled old man.
Who are those men? And why do they look like that?
They are old, my lord.
What do you mean, old?
When Buddha learns about old age and death, he's devastated. He leaves behind his palace, he leaves behind his wealth and his family, and flees into the jungle. Nothing brings him comfort. He studies for years under the Hindu Brahmins and masters the art of meditation, but it's not enough. He masters the art of asceticism, fasting until his body looks like a living skeleton, but it's not enough. Finally, one day, beneath the Bodhi tree, he achieves enlightenment.
The Buddha is an outstanding example of a royal aesthetic. His natural counterpart in dignity is a sovereign who, like a Caesar, could claim that his race comprehended the majesty of kings as well as the sacredness of the gods who hold even the rulers of men in their power. We have seen that the ancient tradition has this precise significance when it speaks of the essential nature of individuals who can only be either imperial or perfectly awakened. We are close to the summits of the Aryan spiritual world. Being himself awakened, the Buddha wished only to encourage an awakening in those who are capable of it. An awakening, in the first place, of a sense of dignity and of vocation.
Another great example of Buddhism's fundamental aristocratic philosophy is the man you've all been waiting for, Baron von Ungern-Sternberg, the god of war. He was a Russian aristocrat from a long line of wealthy barons in Estonia. As he put it, his family were, quote, Huns from the line of Attila. He was this blue-eyed, blonde-haired czarist. He was fiercely loyal to the ancient regime in Russia. He hated the communists. He hated the liberals. He fought savagely against the commies during the Russian Civil War on the side of the whites. When the Bolsheviks won, he gathered an army of czarists and decided to conquer Mongolia. Because what else are you going to do? You know, your country gets conquered by communists. Okay, fine. I'm going to go conquer Mongolia. I'm going to go start my own country. He was this absolutely savage warlord. He burned countless people alive. And he had this deeply elitist worldview. He hated communists and the idea of equality more than anything else. He believed in aristocracy. He believed in monarchy. He believed in tradition and religion. And he was also a Buddhist. He claimed to be a reincarnation of Genghis Khan. He wanted to create a huge Eurasian Buddhist empire. He was even named the incarnate god of war and Khan of Mongolia by the Buddhist leader of Mongolia, who at the time was second only to the Dalai Lama in the hierarchy of Buddhism. He frequently attended Buddhist rituals, and he would ask wandering Mongol shamans to prophesy his future. But here's the really interesting bit. When the Soviets finally captured him and held the gun to his head for execution, he declared that he was a Christian. You see, Baron von Ungern was both a Christian and a Buddhist. Judeo-Christianity, if you want to call it that. Throughout his life, he frequently quoted the Bible, and along with his Buddhist talismans, he always carried a Christian cross. There's a cat. She's curious about the camera. There's this great story that when Alexander the Great conquered the city of Corinth, he marched in with all his soldiers, and everybody in the city ran out to greet him. All the old men, the old women, the young men, the young women, all the children, they all ran out cheering, Alexander, Alexander! They wanted to see this great, magnificent, famous conqueror, except for one man. The philosopher Diogenes just kept lying in the same spot he always lay, under the cypress trees, basking in the warm Mediterranean sun. He didn't care. And Alexander the Great's amazed. He's like, why does this man not want to see me? I'm so famous and magnificent. So he walks over to Diogenes and he looks down at him, lying there in the sand, and he says, Diogenes, ask me for whatever you want, and I will give it to you. And Diogenes kind of shrugs and says, okay, move out of the way, you're blocking the sun. As Alexander's leaving, all his courtiers are laughing, mocking Diogenes, calling him a weird, eccentric little philosopher. But Alexander the Great says, if I was not Alexander, I would be Diogenes. I think the point that Alexander's making here is really quite profound. He's saying that you have these two life paths that seem like total opposites. You have Alexander the Great, who everyone recognizes as a success, a magnificent man. He's famous. Everyone knows who Alexander the Great is. And then you have Diogenes, who spent his life in absolute destitution and poverty. He lived in a pot by the side of the road for his entire life. Everyone would look at Diogenes and say, he's a loser. He's an eccentric weirdo. But Alexander's saying these two paths are actually part of the same philosophy. They're both noble. They're both spiritually aristocratic, because Alexander and Diogenes are both rejecting the normal life. They're both rejecting society's expectations. Alexander says, screw what you think, I'm going to conquer the world, I'm going to be remembered by history. Diogenes, maybe even more fundamentally, rejects society's expectations. He says, I don't care what you think, I'm going to do what makes me happy, I'm going to lie here in the sun, I'm going to live outside, I'm going to enjoy the fresh air, I'm not going to worry about making money or having a career or being successful. And both these great men are fundamentally, spiritually aristocratic. There's a great quote from Aristotle where he says that man without the polis must be either a beast or a god. And I think you can say that Alexander is a god and Diogenes is a beast. But both of them are outside the polis. They both reject collectivism and society's expectations. They both reject civilization. They both reject civilization and return to a state of nature. And that state of nature can look like an eccentric philosopher who just does whatever he wants and doesn't care about making money or being successful in the eyes of the world. Or it can look like a world historic figure who becomes a great man of history. And both those paths are equally aristocratic. And I would argue that Buddhism represents the Diogenes path. It represents the path of, I don't care about any of this stuff. I might be a rich aristocrat living in a palace. I might have all the wealth in the world. But Buddha says, I don't need any of that. That's not what makes me great. Even if I rejected the whole world, rejected my wealth, gave it all up, and lived as a beggar by the side of the road, even if I starved myself in the woods, I would still be great. I would still be an aristocrat in my heart. I would still be better than you. I will always be better than you. Julius Evola has a great quote on this that explains it very well. He says that, quote, the effective aim of Buddhism was to discriminate between different natures, for which the touchstone was the doctrine of awakening itself. In confirmation of this is the fact that the establishment and diffusion of Buddhism never, in later centuries, caused dissolution of the caste system. Even today in Ceylon, the system continues undisturbed side by side with Buddhism. While in Japan, Buddhism lives in harmony with hierarchical, traditional, national, and warrior concepts. Only in certain Western misconceptions is Buddhism, considered in later and corrupted forms, presented as a doctrine of universal compassion, encouraging humanitarianism and democratic equality. Buddhism is essentially aristocratic. Have you ever heard of Daoism? You know, the Chinese philosophy created by Lao Tzu with the yin-yang and all that stuff. Here's the first truth nuke of the day. Buddha and Lao Tzu were actually the same person. That might sound crazy, but if you think about it, Taoism and Buddhism are very similar philosophies. Both have a nihilistic metaphysics in which ultimate reality is elusive and cannot be put into words. The Tao which can be spoken is not the true and unchanging Tao, you know, all that stuff. Both reject dualism and see opposites like light and dark, good and evil, masculine and feminine, as ultimately unified. Yin and yang come together as one. Both religions advocate a life of silence, stillness, and contemplation, the opposite of the Puritan work ethic and the bustling, noisy cities of industrial modernity. Here's the crazy part. Lao Tzu was really just a title. It just means old master. His actual name was Lao Tan. Over the centuries, China has undergone a long series of linguistic shifts, and if you reverse engineer those shifts, Lao Tan becomes Cao Tam, and in even more archaic Chinese, it becomes, you guessed it, Gautama. So Lao Tzu's real name was literally Gautama, which is of course Buddha's name. You can do the same process with the Tao, the Taoist term for the way of nature, the order of the universe. If you reverse engineer the linguistic shifts, the word Tao becomes Dawa, and eventually Darwa. Darwa sounds awfully similar to Dharma, which is the Buddhist word for the order of the universe. So you have this guy named Gautama preaching the Darwa. Sound familiar? According to the Taoist texts, Lao Tzu, quote unquote, lived in northwestern China. This is very interesting because at that time, northwestern China was not inhabited by Han Chinese people. It was inhabited by white people, by Indo-Aryans, specifically by the Scythians. What's interesting is that the earliest attestations of Buddha call him the Scythian sage. At this time, the Scythian Empire reached all the way into India, so it's possible that Buddha's family was Scythian. At the very least, these two ethnic groups were very, very closely related. They were all blue-eyed, nomadic warriors from the Eurasian steppe, so it would make perfect sense for Buddha in his old age to travel to northwestern China and live with his kin. In the Taoist texts, we're told that Lao Tzu left China as an old man and headed home to die. As he crossed the border, the Chinese guards forced him to write down the Tao Te Ching before he left. Where exactly was old man Lao Tzu heading to die? Central Asia, the land of the Scythians. Some of the oldest Buddhist communities in the world were Scythian, and when Buddhism drifted away from its original teachings and became too legalistic, it was the Scythians who restored it by creating Mahayana Buddhism. And now I'm gonna drop an even bigger truth nuke on you. Buddha was the emperor of Persia. Just hear me out on this one, okay? Let daddy cook. After Cyrus the Great was killed by Scythian Amazons, his son Cambyses became king of Persia. And Cambyses just starts schizomaxing. He rides off to Egypt and just starts killing sacred bulls, invading random countries, leading his armies into desert storms, and going totally insane. So the Magi assassinate him and take over the Persian Empire. For those who don't know, the Magi were an ancient order of wise philosophers and priests who read ancient scrolls and studied the stars and kept ancient wisdom and all that kind of stuff. Remember the three wise men from your nativity scene? According to the Bible, they were magi. That's the word used, magi. So this order of philosophers takes over Persia, and guess who leads the coup? According to Herodotus, it's a philosopher named Gaumata. That is almost exactly the same as Buddha's name, Gautama. The T and the M are switched, but remember, all these texts are being copied by hand. That kind of mistake happens all the time. My view is that Gaumata was actually Gautama Buddha, Lao Tzu himself. For one thing, his reign over Persia falls perfectly within the span of Buddha's life. For another thing, Herodotus says that Gaumata came from Media. At this time, Media was run by, guess who? The Scythians. In Iran, you can still find a giant carving of Gaumata, and he's wearing a Scythian hat. As Emperor of Persia, Gaumata was known for his very hands-off, laissez-faire policies. He let the provinces govern themselves, he lowered taxes, and he abolished mandatory service in the army. Hans Hermann Hoppe would be so proud. This hands-off approach is actually very similar to the political philosophy of Taoism. In the Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu writes that, quote, "The more restrictions and regulations there are, the more impoverished men will be. The more rules and laws are enforced, the more bandits and crooks will be produced. Through my non-interfering, men spontaneously increase their wealth." So true, Buddha, so true. Furthermore, Dr. Christopher Beckwith argues that Buddhism/Taoism was a conscious reaction against the religion of the Magi, Zoroastrianism. Zoroastrianism was a very dualistic religion. You had good and evil. Ahura Mazda was absolutely good, and Ahriman was absolutely evil. Every human, every species of animal, every aspect of nature was on one side or the other. Buddhism says no, actually. Good and evil, light and dark, yin and yang, are two sides of the same metaphysical monad. All aspects of creation are beautiful, even those that seem cruel to us finite humans. Wouldn't it make sense if Buddha traveled to Persia, joined the Zoroastrian magi, and then broke off to create his own non-dualist religion? What if Buddhism is actually a heretical sect of Zoroastrianism? Whatever the case, Buddha's libertarian monarchy didn't last forever. You see, during this whole time, Buddha is disguised as Smerdis, the son of Cyrus the Great. Everybody thinks he's the real Smerdis, but one day, one of his concubines takes off his hat. According to Herodotus, she notices that his ears are missing and realizes, hold on, you're not Smerdis? Now that's a pretty weird and wacky story, but if we accept that Gaumata is Buddha, it starts to make a little more sense. You see, there's a very old tradition that Buddha's most distinctive features were his long ears. All the stories and statues portray Buddha with extremely long earlobes. By the way, the same tradition was told about Laozi. Remember how over time his name evolved into Lao Tan? The name Lao Tan literally means old long ears. What if this crazy story that Herodotus is telling is partially true? The concubine did identify him by his ears, but not because they were missing, because they were abnormally long. Over time, the story got jumbled up and we end up with the silly version in Herodotus. When everybody realized that Buddha wasn't the legitimate king, an aristocrat named Darius slaughtered all the magi, took control of Persia, and executed Gautama. Or did he? There's something fishy about this story too. According to Herodotus, Darius publicly executed all the conspirators except Gaumata, who he killed in private. Why would Darius do that? He made a public spectacle of all the other conspirators. Why not the leader of the conspirators? This is yet another story that makes way more sense if we accept that Gaumata was Buddha. You see, Darius was a philosopher king. When he took over Persia, he had a whole debate with the other nobles about the best form of government, in which he argued for monarchy on a philosophical basis. Years later, Darius invited the Greek philosopher Heraclitus to become his court philosopher. Clearly, this was a man who cared about ideas. Could it be that he spared Buddha's life and secretly banished him instead of killing him so that Buddha could keep philosophizing? If this theory is true, if Buddha really did live in Persia, this explains why some of the earliest yin-yang symbols are found in northern Iran. This explains why, during the Parthian period, eastern Iran was more Buddhist than India. The largest Buddhist temple ever built was in Iran. The largest Buddhist statues were in Iran until they were tragically destroyed by the Taliban. The final piece of evidence is that Buddha's first name, Siddhartha, is actually a Persian name. It's been found inscribed at Persepolis, and it comes from the Iranian words Sid Arta, meaning the power of truth. Why would an Indian sage have a Persian name? But if Buddha spent a few years living in Persia, everything starts to fall together. And here's the best part. If we accept this theory, it means that Buddha met the prophet Daniel. You guys have all been reading your Bibles, right? Daniel is a wise, holy prophet who is taken prisoner to Babylon and has all these miraculous visions. He ends up befriending King Nebuchadnezzar II, who puts him in charge of the Magi. You see where this is going? When Cyrus the Great conquers Babylon, Daniel becomes friends with him too. Then Cyrus is killed by Scythians, and Cambyses takes over, and then, that's right, Daniel was still alive and still leading the Magi when Buddha came to Persia. He would have been the one who initiated Buddha into the Magi Brotherhood, and they would have ruled Persia together. The Bible doesn't actually tell us when Daniel was killed, but now that we know all this history, we can assume that he was killed by Darius when the Magi coup was foiled in 522 BC. You know who else was killed in 522 BC? Zoroaster. There's a long-standing theory among Christians that Zoroaster was a name for the prophet Daniel. After all, Zoroastrianism is a monotheistic religion, and its beliefs are strikingly similar to Judaism. In both religions, you have an all-good, all-knowing Sky Father, a god of truth and light, who created the world and banned certain kinds of meat. In both religions, 7 is a sacred number. In both religions, fire is a symbol of God's holiness. Just look at the sacred fire in Zoroastrian temples, or the Bible stories of the burning bush and the pillar of fire and Pentecost. In fact, Zoroastrianism even has a trinity. In Zoroastrianism, Skyfather is accompanied by Spenta whose name literally means Holy Spirit. Sound familiar? In Zoroastrianism, Skyfather is surrounded by 7 spirits called Amesha Spentas. In the Book of Revelation, God is surrounded by 7 spirits like burning candles. In Zoroastrianism, Skyfather wages war on Ahriman, the destroyer and the lord of lies. In Judaism, God wages war on Satan, the destroyer and the lord of lies. Even secular historians say, yeah, clearly these two religions are related. They say that Zoroastrianism influenced Judaism. I'm saying it's the opposite. A Jew named Daniel came to Persia and taught the Zoroastrians this religion. Both Zoroaster and Daniel lived during the reign of Cyrus. Both men lived in the Persian Empire. Both men were part of the Magi order. Both men were renowned for their wisdom and prophetic visions. And here's the kicker. The 3 wise men who visit baby Jesus were Zoroastrian Magi. Why would these 3 Zoroastrians travel all the way to Bethlehem to visit Jesus? Well, in Zoroastrianism, there's a prophecy that a virgin will give birth to the Messiah, the Saioshant, who will redeem the world. If my theory is right, that messianic prophecy came from Zoroaster himself, the prophet Daniel. Sure enough, the Arabic infancy gospel says that, quote, the Magi came to Jerusalem from the east as Zoroaster had predicted. In the year 483 BC, Buddha wandered back to the Himalayan mountains. He was old, very old, and he wanted to die in the land of his fathers. Buddha, Laozi, Heraclitus, whatever you want to call him, made his way up into the snowy heights to gaze down on the world one last time. He climbed higher and higher, dressed only in his orange sari, and finally collapsed in the snow. Hours later, he was found by the Yeti of Agartha, and they carried him to the city beneath the mountains, and taught him the secret texts of Enoch and Melchizedek. May the spirit of Agartha be with you always, and may white monster ever flow in your veins. Thank you so much for watching, and may God bless China, India, Persia, the world.
Swiftly bring about their eradication, their annihilation, we pray. Yes.
Oh my gosh, I almost forgot my favorite part of the whole video, the Patreon question of the week. This week it comes from my buddy Seal, who asks, I know that you talk a lot about your love and care for the environment, but I was wondering, when environmental protections hurt the economy, would you choose to protect the economy or the environment? And my answer to that is pretty simple. I will always choose to protect the environment. Every single time. Asking me to sacrifice the environment for the economy is like asking me to kill my brother for the economy. It's like, I don't care how much poorer people will be. I don't care how much people will suffer. Those people are lower on the value scale as far as my personal ordo amoris goes than the environment. I will always choose the forests and the oceans and the wildlife. I will always choose to protect endangered species, to protect the untouched wilderness. Some of y'all did not spend enough time outside as a kid. I was taking walks in the woods every single day, seeing new landscapes, exploring canyons and gullies. You cannot tell me that any amount of GDP per capita, any amount of wealth is worth tearing down a forest, tearing down someone's childhood forest, tearing down these beautiful, sacred, irreplaceable places. Once they're gone, they're gone. And that's a profound, profound tragedy. I care about nature. more than I care about anything else except for my own family and God. Oh, hi there. How are you doing? Don't mind me, I'm just sitting here looking out over a beautiful lake, thinking about how much I love my patrons. In fact, while I'm on the subject, I might as well thank them. So thank you from the bottom of my warm, fuzzy heart to Richard, Opp, Gerald, Anthony Nolan, Techno Faustian, Half Buckeye, Killian, Killian's really strong, Jax, Will, Vincius Neves, Rock Bullet, Trigon, the Xylex, Kozaru, Missing Person, Michael, the Fiery One, NSA Watchlist Bait, AA Gaming, Macaroni, Reed, Curious Leftist, Samarkand19er, Jawad Issa, Webb, Nihilus is here, Nick, Total Nicked Elmo, Philip von Filbert, King Crypto, Maxim, Sun Tzu, Larry, Mount Maxito, Eric, Rodney's cool, Hossboss, Brandon, Voiborn, Danis, Seb, Sebastian, two goats, as in greatest of all time, not literally. Goats, Jake, Mark, Ryrot, Bill, Aiden the Astronaut, Carter, Baseballgarian, Medi, Lucas, GPC, Ben, Karthik, he's gay, Piedar, Frank, Zakia, Benjamin, Wesley, Dan, Honorary A, Bennett, Christian, Contranock, and TDW. Thank you guys so much. I hope you enjoyed this video. We're talking a little bit more about religion nowadays, just because that's been on my mind. And what's the point in having a YouTube channel if you can't talk about what's really stirring you, what's really moving your heart? I've been reading a lot of my Bible, thinking a lot about scripture and apologetics. I've been going to a new Bible study that's really got me fired up. So yeah, we're going to have some Christianity related videos over the next month. We're going to be talking about why I believe in Jesus Christ, our Savior, the historical arguments, the historical epistemology, how do we know which sources to trust. We're going to talk about the Gospel of Thomas, maybe, if we get around to it. It's going to be a great time. So if you're interested in my religious views, or if you just want to argue with me, stick around. We'll have a great time, and we're going to have some debating in the server. I have absolutely no doubt. Oh, by the way, do you like my shirt? Hold on, let me show it to you. It's a very good shirt. It says Atomkraft Yabite. It's a parody of the anti-nuclear power shirts that are very popular in Germany. That say Atomkraft 9 Danke. So this says yes please to nuclear power. So if you support nuclear power, if you're a true nuclear patriot, you'll want to order this shirt. In fact, Christmas is coming up. Go ahead, buy dozens and dozens, hundreds even, of Arthur Greenwood merchandise items. You will not regret it, and I'll be very grateful. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. God bless Agartha. Adios.